Okay, so thanks for coming. Today's member to member the organizing training is going to be about organizing conversations and how we can use one-on-one conversations to bring our members in and to kind of better form solidarity. Almost everything in here I pulled from an awesome book called Secrets of a Successful Organizer, and it's largely where I learned what I do know about organizing. And I find it to be very useful. And we're gonna have a lot of time, I think, in here to kind of brainstorm ideas and share how we could use these techniques right now, because there's a lot of opportunities. So one thing is just, what is an organizing conversation? One of the keys is that it is one-on-one. And that it's really meant to be relational. So kind of a two-way conversation. So admittedly, as the kind of member organizer, the mini organizer, our goal really is to listen. So it's kind of we do the 2 ears, 1 mouth, right? We should be listening twice as much as we're talking if we're the one who instigated this conversation. Our goal is to really develop a relationship with the person we're talking to, get to know their concerns and issues, also get to know who they know, like what networks are they a part of, how do they fit into the building, to the union, to the community. Also kind of just in your head thinking about, could this be a potential leader? We have to remember leaders aren't always the people who are present at a meeting and the loudest. Leaders can take a lot of different forms, and we need all those different forms to be involved in our union, especially at our building level. We also want to get them thinking. So a big part of this conversation is to start getting them to ask questions, especially around their concerns and issues, right? So like, oh, why is that happening? Why do you think that happens? And then helping them probe deeper if they haven't maybe really given it a lot of thought. Or if they already have, fantastic. And then like, you might see them as someone who we can draw in right away to being more a part of the union kind of organizing activities. And then we have a lot of actions going on right now. So luckily we don't even have to create action steps. We've got things we can plug people into right away. And we have actions that are already ongoing that we can help use to really kind of empower the people we're talking to, and hopefully draw them in to get them even more involved in the future. So, and again, this is mostly from labor notes, but the idea is that this is an art, not a science. I am going to be showing kind of some components, but we don't want to be little robots who are just kind of reading a script and just asking like, here's my 10 questions. Let me ask them to you like an interviewer. That isn't the goal. But we do want to be prepared. This shouldn't just be an off the cuff, like just kind of walking in and like finding someone at the copy machine that we can't do that anymore, like, and then just trying to talk to them for 20 minutes. Part of it is knowing yourself and how you relate to the issues you're hoping to get to, right? In this case, you know, distance learning, going back in person. So just kind of having a clear idea of how maybe you can fit your story in so that, again, they can see that like we have relationships, that we do have things in common. But we do also want to remember like we're still trying to listen more than we talk. So even though we are preparing our own story, gotta keep it short and simple, and then really use it as a way to just provide more avenues for further communication with the person you're talking to. You do want to think about framing, how you might start the meeting, how you might end it. And then, you know, always have, if it is kind of stalling out, some people are shy or they don't like to elaborate. Just having some possible questions kind of in your head that you could ask them, things you are interested in knowing about them, that could, you know, again, kind of be helpful in getting to know them better and their interests and concerns and how, you know, we can better connect with them and bring them into the union. We want to have an organizer attitude. So it's not just about getting a signature on a petition. It really is about building that relationship. And while we do want to ask them to take action, that's not, again, for us because we just want their signature. It's because taking an action is empowering. Like putting your name to something that is a little scary, like saying no DCPS, we're not going back until you come to the table with us. Like, that's not something our union has really said or done in a long time. And so that's empowering. Yes, it helps the union, we get another signature, etc. But really, this is about empowering our members to take a stand. And in that first one, take a stand through the petition. And we do want to get to know them. I mean, that's the goal. We're trying to build relationships in our building, build that solidarity so that we do feel like we can trust each other and we can stand together when it starts to really get tough. And it will. I mean, I think, you know, if Mr. Goldfarb's right and DCPS makes the wrong call, which is entirely possible, then we have to be ready to take a stand, and we got to trust each other to have each other's backs when the time comes. And then, like, kind of lastly, organizers, we follow up. That's what we do. We don't just leave them, you know, like, oh, never see me again after you've signed my petition. Like, thanks, I got what I needed. See ya. Like, that's not the point. Again, the point is to really bring them in, develop that community, get to know each other, get to hopefully be friendly, but at least as colleagues in the union. And so we want to digest what we learn afterwards. So having just a few notes on the person, and I really focusing on those areas of interest, and then adding that to the list. So in our previous presentation, which I've linked here and we'll, you know, share the YouTube link for, we talked about list building, and some of that is like tracking who signed the petition, seeing, you know, leadership potential. You might want to, you know, make a little note like, hey, this is a future, you know, SCAC member in the making, or something like that, if you want to bring them into formal union leadership. Or maybe it's just like, this could be a really great person to communicate with these 5 other people, because I noticed, like, the way they're talking, their department really listens to them. And so I want, you know, to maybe have them be a phone tree captain for that department. Like, we can find opportunities to key them in and give them a role and keep us all involved and working together. So it's not just, you know, 2 or 3 people always going out on a limb or doing all the work and then kind of falling off because they burn out. So the next part is going to be where we can do a little more interaction here, and just brainstorming ideas. So this is all from Secrets of a Successful Organizer, pages 52 through 58. And I really just cut and pasted it because it's that great. Luckily, they're a super awesome organization and they're totally cool with this kind of action. In fact, they encourage it. They put up tons of worksheets on their website that are free that go along with their book. So they're really about empowering rank and file members. So we're totally good in terms of what we're doing right now. So kind of like we said, these are the steps to like what a conversation should ideally do. So first, it's getting to know the person, asking them some questions. Again, not like an interviewer, like really a conversation, asking follow-up questions. Yes, we're focused on work, but it doesn't have to exclusively be on work. It could be about how, you know, they got into this kind of line of work. What they love about their job. You know, you can go any direction the conversation takes you. The goal is to kind of get to know them and also think about kind of how they feel, in this case, about, you know, distance learning. Are there any thoughts about how, like, some either good questions we know people should be asking members right now that we think could get them interested, or ideas of how we can, what issues that we do want to kind of definitely ask about if we're doing organizing conversations over the summer?
I would say, I think it's important, like you said, that it's, you know, just have conversations with people and balance it between, you know, asking the probing questions about specific to union stuff and just the personal, interpersonal stuff. Like you said, you know, hey, you know, how you doing? How's the family? You know, what'd you do this weekend? That sort of thing. Those conversations, people appreciate that kind of human contact. You know, or, you know, I heard, you know, your mom was in the hospital last week. How's she doing? You know, the kid had a dental appointment. How'd that go? I mean, stuff like that, little things like that, I think are very important. They don't have to, you know, you don't want them to dominate the discussion, but then also when you get into questions about issues, you know, a lot of it is asking questions and having people come up with the answers. Like, you know, why do you think that is? You know, who do you think is responsible for that? And also, just if people tell you issues, what I find is a lot of people have similar issues too, and so kind of reinforcing them and just saying like, you know, oh yeah, you know, a lot of other people have told me that too. You're not the only one, you know, and making them feel like they're part of a, you know, it's not just them being isolated, you know, they're part of a bigger group.
Others have ideas of how we could use, there's several steps. So there's lots of opportunities to chime in. Other thoughts on like how to kind of draw them into the conversation, or potential things to kind of just, again, discover what they're thinking?
I'm assuming that we would be speaking to, in this case, I'm not sure if you're talking about speaking to people you don't know or who you do know. In my case, when I'm speaking to people in my building, I pretty much know, and we have 34, it's not like we have a huge staff, so I know everybody. So of course I would start off with, how are you? How's the family? I mean, that's just a natural way to talk to somebody. But I don't know that I would be looking for this deep, involved conversation. I would go right to, what are your feelings about going back to school? The union proposes this. How do you stand? What do you think? And listen to what they say, not taking a side, just listening to what they say, writing it down, and moving on. If somebody says, well, I think we should go back to school, you say, why? You say, do you think you'd be safe? Would you support those who didn't want to go back? And after that, you don't argue with them. You don't try to convince them. Move on. Let's just, you know, we need to find out what the temperature of the room is.
Do you feel like your building is there a lot of solidarity in the building? Do you feel like people feel like a community already?
We're united in our hate for DCPS and our principal for the most part. So, you know, if you want to look at it from that perspective.
But I guess, like, do members, you know, teachers and fellow members in your building talk to each other, socialize? Like, is it, do they trust each other? Do you feel like there is kind of that trust and community in the building amongst members?
That's why I would be asking these questions. Do I feel I can talk to any of the members of there? Sure. Do I think they'll run back and speak to my principal? In some cases, yes, they will.
Well, I think that some of it is like, right, kind of deciding who to talk to, and in your building, possibly like dividing it up, right? So like it might be that you're talking mainly to people that you already are close to in your department.
Yeah, but I'm not gonna say wasting, I'm saying, but spending more time right now, the only thing for me and for our meeting is, would you go back? What conditions would you go back under? Would you support those? I
think that you're right in that, like, discovering the issues, if you're already close to somebody, like you can go, you know, as you said, like you start, you know, just normal conversation, like checking in with them, but then you can go right into their issues on returning in person. So it could just be, right, how do you feel about returning in person?
Right now, there is no other.
Still start with just getting their opinions, like you said, right? That's going to be the opening. Like it could just be very targeted, right? Because we do have a targeted issue right now that is probably at the top of everyone's minds. Like, and you're right, we want to know, how do they feel? How do they feel about returning to work in person? And that could be you discovering the issue. So I do think it still kind of fits in the framework. And even though we're talking about it for a long time, it doesn't mean it has to be the bulk of the conversation necessarily. But I think it lines up with what you're saying, I believe. So Mr. Goldfarb actually got to the next part, which is kind of about agitating. So if they're like, oh yeah, I'm fine with it, like, well, then you do, right, follow up with some questions about what circumstances might they be fine with it in? What if those circumstances aren't met, right? Like, what if you come to the building one day and there's no PPE? What if 20 of your students show up because they messed up their schedule and it was only supposed to be 10, then what? So the next step is about agitating. Um, and those follow-up questions really can, I mean, help get you to it. So it could be about like, oh, DCPS never listens to us. Oh man, you know, like how long has that been going on? Like trying to really start to begin to see like, that's not normal. Or, you know, Mr. Goff, I've already said people at his school are not happy with a lot of stuff going on. So with DCPS, so they might already be kind of agitated. So it might not be hard to get through this step. It could be they're there. But if they're not, then, or if they're scared to even express discontent, right? DCPS is a scary place for a lot of teachers. Helping them feel like it's okay. Does anyone have like additional things that we need to consider here in the agitate stage, or things they've done that have worked, or questions that they find are kind of their go-tos?
Um, I, I would say, I think you want to, you know, when you talk to people and you're trying to uh, get them, move them towards some action, you're always going to get some pushback from some people. And I think it's important to kind of navigate that carefully, because, you know, I think, you know, a lot of people can start out with a certain attitude and then be turned around. I've had a lot of conversations with some of my people that, you know, who, you know, they're concerned about the consequences if we refuse to go back, for example. You know, I need to know what's going to happen, what, you know, and, you know, the short answer to that is we don't know. I mean, we don't know how DCPS responds to, you know, any kind of resistance from the teachers. We don't know what they'll do. But a lot of people want some kind of assurance, and that takes a conversation. And I try to just kind of bring up different scenarios. You know, I've talked about different historical scenarios where people took a stand on things because they believed it was right, and they didn't know how it was going to turn out. They didn't know if they'd be successful or not. But you know, these are the great heroes we study in history. You know, so sometimes life requires us to do that. And then also, I would say just, yeah, I think I wanted to go back to the point that Daniel was making about people being united in their hatred for DCPS, or their, you know, anger at it, which is true. It's definitely true. But I would say we also want to try to build that, or try to transform that into, you know, organizing people around something, a negative thing like anger or hatred. That's a beginning point, but that's not what you want to use as to drive your movement forward. I think organizing people and reminding people why we're here, why we're doing this profession. And, you know, I think most educators, when they really think about it, they understand that, you know, we're doing this, you know, for very, I don't want to say noble reasons, but for, you know, we're driven to do this maybe differently than other professions are driven to do what they do. And just reminding people of that, you know, that we're there for the students, you know, and that's what we're really all about. And that's like our one thing that unites us, is our passion, our commitment to the students. And, you know, so kind of trying to turn it around that way. And leading people to where they maybe already are, but, you know, they're not always, people may already be there, but they might need a little guidance to be directed there, I guess, if that sounds correct.
So I think some of what you're saying was kind of jumping to like the step 4, I think. Not that like these have to be in some robotic order. Obviously conversations go where they flow, and kind of and we all develop our own styles of how to navigate through the different components of what we need to accomplish. I think that was all really good. Obviously, you're very good at this. So one thing that we do need to accomplish with kind of their anger over a particular situation is to kind of make sure that, frankly, we're on the same page about why this is happening. Some people put a lot of thought into it and they're very knowledgeable about what's going on. Some people just kind of sit with like, well, I am angry about it, but I just got to mind my own business, keep it moving. I'm a busy person, and that's all legitimate too. What I've found in my experience when it comes to thinking about, who's responsible, in my building, a lot of times my principal, I've had many, is blamed for what's going on in the building. Some of that is accurate, for sure. Principals are far from blameless in situations. At the same time, principals are in a very tough spot, right? When our budget's getting cut year after year after year at my school, it's not because the principal wanted to access all these positions. This is not something they wanted to do. And luckily at my school, my principals do operate with integrity. So when a position is getting cut, it is not personal attempts to get someone out the door. That's a whole different issue. And then they are definitely to blame in that situation. But it's more just that our programs keep getting cut. And there's just nothing, we do fight for it, but when it comes down to it, if we don't win the money, then we don't win the money. So helping refocus our school's energy, not on being upset in the meeting when things are getting announced that we have another budget cut, but instead pivoting and showing up at the city council, being like, hey, they're cutting our school's budget. We need more money. Make sure that the money is going to our schools, etc. Targeting the mayor and being like, how can you have budget cuts when we're increasing the amount, right? Really helping them see okay, our principal doesn't want to do this, but this is what we have. This is what we're stuck with. So we got to then pivot and turn to who is the problem, where is the problem, and how can we try to fight that. I will say one thing. In Woodson, we know who the problem is. We really have kind of built that culture in our school of really talking about things as a system, recognizing that our school is not alone in being treated this way. And that we do have to bond together with other schools, especially east of the river, to deal with our budget issues when we face these continuous, massive, illegal budget cuts. Year after year. Just an endless cycle of reduction. And a lot of it is, just asking questions, and also, in this case, doing a little informing. At least that's kind of my style, admittedly, because I act like a big know-it-all. So I just kind of let people know, hey, who actually got the budget? The mayor. We need to go get her. Do other people have thoughts on how to just kind of make sure that we are on the same page of who the target is going to need to be, and that, we're having those conversations?
Perhaps we should reframe, instead of saying who's to blame, to say who's responsible. Because as much as I want to blame my principal, for pretty much everything, I recognize that she actually works very hard within the constraints of her position to make sure that we have what we have, and she does her best. Now, she's not always successful, but neither am I. So, laying the blame, we don't understand because we're not there. We don't know what the mayor is thinking. We don't know what she's going through. We don't know what pressure she's under, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So blame is a bad. Who is responsible for change is a really completely different approach. So I could say, well, our principal has to this, that, and the other. The mayor needs to this, that, or the other. And we also have to accept this. The more money that we make, the more money that we take, although we work far beyond the constraints of the contract. I haven't had a day at school where I've worked less than 14 hours, and I'm sure you're all pretty much the same. we have to understand that when we make demands for more money, it's not like the more money is going to go to the school. They're going to balance that out by cutting other stuff. So in a weird way, part of it is our demands that are righteous being met by people who, in order to balance the books, say, okay, we'll give you more money, but we're going to take money from here,
right?
so that
Like,
we
why
spend the same
they
amount of
raise
money.
taxes on the wealthiest 5%, which could get us $500 million if we just clawed back the Trump tax cuts from last year? Why not?
That's not the point I'm making. The
But
point
I
I'm
think
not,
it kind of
I'm,
is,
I'm
right?
simply
That
stating,
we have to put the blame where it belongs. And the blame belongs with the 1%. The blame belongs with leaders who serve business interests over the interests of the people and then force us to duke out over scarce resources, right?
you are
The
missing
problem
the
is,
point.
like, central office is 10 times bigger than any other central office in this country in terms of per pupil spending, right? And they
That's
take it out on our schools, and then they try to blame teachers when we try to ask for a raise for what you said, right? Like, I mean,
no argument.
no, I know, I'm just saying, like, we have to extend ourselves beyond, and we have to help our members extend themselves beyond the traps that they lay for us, right? Because, like, when you go to the mayor's budget, like, little, big round tables, you sit at the tables, she's like, if you had $100, what percent would you spend it on education, on this? And then they try to set this whole, like, oh, yeah, but if you spend more on education, you have to spend less on housing. And that's a false choice, right? That's what they try to set us up to think, that we have to pit ourselves against our own parents, right? And be like, well, if we want more money for schools, we're gonna have to cut this rent subsidy. No, you don't. You can just claw back tax cuts from the rich. Or no, you don't. You could be taxing big box industries, which you have been giving tax cuts to for the past 5 years under automatic tax cut triggers, like we're some Republican stronghold, right? Like, they keep pushing us into these weird corners where they act like, oh, well, Woodson, if you want more money, we're gonna have to take it from Wilson. Is that not fair to you? And it's like, I don't want to take any money from Wilson. Get a bigger pot, which you can do, right? So, like, we have to reframe ourselves and help ourselves and our members make sure that, like you said, going against the principal right now doesn't make any sense, because she does not control whether we go back or not. We gotta, like you said, and I think you're right, focus on who's responsible. The mayor makes the call in this city. That's her choice, right? So she is the target. The council should be holding her responsible, and they have completely abdicated that role when it comes to education. So
let's stay away. Let's stay away, because some of our constituents, some of the people we need, and I don't disagree with you in theory, but right now it does not serve us to be screaming, take away money from the rich, take away this, take away that. On a personal level, it makes sense. But the problem is, for our purposes, we can point out that's false. Just give the money, because let's cut down the bloat. Let's not do this, that, and the other. On a personal level, we can protest politically all that we feel is correct, but we cannot get ourselves bogged down to, because it's distracting from the point. So let's stay clear of all these peripherals in terms of where we get the money, because they all know what the argument is. And once you bring it up, it becomes, well, a mask is a political statement. That's what it becomes. So I'm begging us just to keep our eye on the prize and say that's false choice. There is more money. You don't have to take one from the other. We don't have to explain where it has to come from. They know where it has to come from. We don't have to say, you've been doing this wrong all this time, making people defensive. They know what they've been doing wrong all this time. Let's try to keep this squarely within our lane and not deviate, not be distracted by all the, and again, 100% agree with you on what you're saying, but I am afraid that that plays into this whole Trumponian approach of divide and distract.
Well, I do think
It's like this.
I agree with you.
We're talking about what's going on.
We have to point out the traps to our members. You're right. We don't have to point them to, like, all the answers, because that's not our job. We were not elected to have all the answers. You're right about that.
And
But
we have to
you have
remember,
to make sure that they are pointed in the right direction, right? When we're bringing them in, we need to point them at whatever the target is, right? And if the target's the mayor and the council right now, because they are the ones responsible for the situation we're in, it's just a matter of making sure that they're on the same page, that that's the target.
okay.
But you are right. We're not supposed to have all the answers. That's not our job. You're right. We're fighting so that we can do our jobs and do it safely. And that these are the people who can make the call right now as to how that happens. You're right. Kimberlyn, did you want to say something?
Here. Sorry about that. Let's see. Yeah, spot on. I'm just trying to get a stronger sense of our focus, right? I mean, I agree with Daniel. Is that Daniel? I hope I said that. If we start going off, right, tangent, which is important stuff, but I would expect that members and trust of those members have a background knowledge. They understand something about how government works. You're not going to force a student or a person who just has no real clue. They might come, they might not come, but they really don't have a clue. They're not really as strong as you need them, so they may have to exist on a different level of membership. I don't mean that biasly, please. You know, you're going to take a real crew that has background knowledge, knows and understands governments and how they work, and can see the political game that's going on. And from there, you're going to use that leadership to help nurture and do what you have to do, but you're going to have to lead them. I'm sorry. People that don't know are like children. That's why children have parents. And I'm not saying be paternal, because if you do that, you know, which people do. I mean, Hitler, hello, how did he get all those people? And I'm not trying to be humorous.
Yep, we're staying focused.
Okay, you had a lot of people that helped him kill a lot of people. Okay, power, and they did it, and they weren't worried. They weren't worried.
You're right. This is not necessarily an in-depth part of the conversation.
No, but I'm talking about blame, Laura. I'm just making my own point here, okay? Because I'm really worried about having enough key players that understand and can lead others, right? Can help them.
But this is about one-to-one conversations with our members, right? Trying to just make sure that we are people who might not have thought about it before onto the same page. That's the goal, right? Including people who might be hostile, right?
Yeah. You always know when
oh, my principal, he's always giving me the worst classroom. Like, huh, bad about that classroom and why?
Or you're not letting me talk.
Okay. I just want us to stay focused because we're recording.
I'm sorry. I'm with you on that, okay? I know when somebody doesn't really know, like I know when the student doesn't really know something, what I'm gonna do, right? I'm gonna let that student be where they are. I'm gonna teach them where they are, but I'm gonna also let the group go off that can do the work, right? Isn't that the deal?
Well, right, we do wanna know what they know. That is part of our organized conversation, is figuring out where they're at. You're right, and kind of trying to meet them where they're at and bring them on.
And that's exactly where I see the model as. You meet where they are, and if some of them know and they're good enough, then those are going to be my A students anyway. And they're going to move on, and they're going to help nurture some of the others as I try to do the same thing. That's all, okay?
You're absolutely right. And they're definitely not a one-off. So you're right, you don't have to get into some huge in-depth conversation if they're not on the same page. And you can always plan to come back for later to, you know, try and continue to build on wherever you were at. You're right.
Right. Offer additional resources.
Take off real quick, and you won't have to continue that conversation. Okay, so you know, where a person's angry, they're pointed in the right direction as kind of where really, you know, the situation has come from, the root causes of what's going on. So now we don't want to just leave them there in their angry situation. And this, I think, gets to what Steve was talking about earlier about this whole plan to win. So this can, I mean, take lots of different forms. It sounds like at Banneker, it might be taking the form of, we're going to be writing a letter, right, together. So it could be a building action. It could be just the union has, you know, what do you think would happen if every single member signed a petition right? That said, we're not going back until our demands are met. So this is where you get to offer them hope, talk about the power in numbers, the power of solidarity, the power of being together, and that they're not standing alone. The fact that over 5,000 people have already signed our petition. So if they haven't signed it yet, they're joining a large number already. And that now it's our goal to make this a problem for the decision maker, for Mayor Bowser, for the chancellor, that your problem is now going to become their problem, and that we're going to do this together. And we're not, going to stop until our problems are solved. So their thoughts, so I mean, we have the petition, we have like building actions, like a letter. Other thoughts, kind of how to, I think this was where Steve talked about sharing historical examples that people might have some foundation on that help them, or even just like other unions if they're like, oh yeah, I remember West Virginia, Oklahoma.
Keep a narrow focus
Mm-hmm.
so we don't get distracted.
Okay. If people don't care about distance learning, it can be a little trickier, or they don't care about, in-person learning, but chances are you could probably, always try to find a way to tie their issue into the in-person question, into the distance learning question, pretty easily. I personally don't think there's anyone who I know who is not concerned about this. There's certainly different levels of concern, and there's different levels of willingness to maybe stand up to it, but I don't know anyone who's just not concerned. But does anyone have any ideas of if someone really was like, well, I don't care, I'll go back. Like, I don't care what happens. Like how we can, or they don't even care about this issue at all. They care about something else, like how we can try to draw them in. What do we feel like people?
I'm not sure what you're asking us.
Well, it's just, like, if what we're doing right now does not address the issue that they care about, and we're trying to still get them to address this issue. So like here they give the kind of example like, well, if we're successful on this petition, then potentially, we'll be able to do other actions and take on other issues in the future, that like this win begets other wins. So if your issue is more impact, then, if we win here, we might then build the strength to win on impact, or we might build the strength to win on, X, Y, Z. That like, that's, at least that's one of the ways they're kind of talking about it. If we can get our numbers up and we stay together, and then we continue to stay together, then we can get anything that we believe in and we're willing to fight for. So that's kind of the thought there, just if they're not on board. So then there is the commitment. So we do ask them to be part of the solution and take a specific action. So we do have the signing the petition if they haven't already. But what about if they have signed the petition? Then what kind of things could we ask of our members? Because we do want to make an ask to build on whatever they've done.
You could send a personal note to various people, the mayor, the board, et cetera, your principal. You can send a personal email. Let's remember, nobody's delivering anything anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Nor should we suggest or encourage anybody to go deliver anything anywhere. It is, that kind of defeats the whole point we're making, that we're a little nervous about this whole thing. It's kind of foolish to say, well, we'll come and deliver this to you. Obviously.
We've been spraying stuff down with Lysol. That's what we did when we put signs on people's doors. We sprayed them with disinfectant.
I am immunocompromised to the point that I have been in 4 different doctor's offices and 4 stores since March. Mm-hmm. I have seen my brother and my sister-in-law from 10 feet and my mother. Other than that, mm-hmm. These 4 walls and where I walk my dog. And then I go to Delaware where I have 4 other walls. I'm not going out. You know, I would love to have been at the BLM protest, but not if it's going to kill me.
You're right. We
And
should
to
definitely
go out
target
and
the
go, it's great that you guys showed up and you feel safe doing that, but you can't ask people to do that in this way and guilt them into doing it. You can't say, hey, will you deliver this with us? You say, we are going to deliver if you'd like to join. A very different statement. We have to be very careful about pushing people into things.
You are right. Getting a commitment should not be pushy. We should be feeling out where people are at, what they've done, what they might be willing to do. And we can
As I
ask,
said, very
like
pushily.
you said, you're right. We want to invite people like, hey, you know, we're going to have this car caravan. Is that something you could do? And you do want to make sure, right, that they feel comfortable enough with you. If you're being successful, right, the hope would be they feel comfortable enough with you to be able to say yes or no, right? And not feel like, oh, well, you're just here to get something out of me. Because then the conversation wasn't very successful because it feels transactional to the other person, and not, you know, and that shouldn't be the goal. I mean, the commitment is so that we have something to build on. The commitment could be, would you consider attending the Zoom meeting that we're holding? Would you, and it should be based on what they've done. If they've already done like 20 things, you're like, whoa. It's like, oh, well, could you maybe share some of what you've been doing already with our members? And maybe bring, help a couple other people take similar actions. Like you can identify kind of from your conversation, hopefully, and from already knowing the person, what your ask would be. But the goal would still be to get them to commit to do something, bringing them into the collective, be it really big to really small. And yeah, you're absolutely right. Not be pushy, not be judgmental, be based on what they feel comfortable doing, because we want them to enjoy participating in union actions, not feeling strong-armed or upset about it, or like they have to put themselves in harm's way when our whole goal, yes, is safety. It's absolutely true. Absolutely true. And we will have some direct actions. Hopefully, we're planning them with organizing committee for next week. So hopefully there'll be, potential actions to even plug people into right away if you're having conversations right away. Almost done here. So then one of the things we do is we inoculate. We know this isn't without risk. Steve said a lot of people are going to ask about the risks, which is fair. It's on our minds. Like, what is the risk of signing the petition? Or what is the risk of refusing to return? What will happen to me? If August 31st comes, they said in person, and we stay home and fire up our computers and say, hey, Canvas. So, we do have to talk about that. We don't want people to be going in with a false sense of 100% security in any action, because like Steve said, we can't guarantee every outcome. And we shouldn't be going in assuming it's going to go a certain way, because if it goes poorly, then our whole line might break and people might start just being like, well, I guess it's, that or lose my job, so I'm going back in. And then suddenly we're not together anymore, right? So even though it does sound like we're undermining what we're doing, it is important to, hear their fears and also just kind of make sure they do know to an extent what they're getting into, especially if they're really new to this, and haven't been involved in anything yet. But that, we talk through possible outcomes and why it's important that if we stick together, a lot of those risks become less and less and less. Certainly not zero, but, the importance of solidarity, standing together, and then recommitting to taking the action. Like, you know what, it's important enough. My life is on the line. If we stand together, we could win. And then those risks are gone. But that if we don't stand together, we've automatically lost. And it's either like, well, I guess I'm looking for another job because all the other surrounding areas are going to offer distance learning and we know there's a teacher shortage. Versus like, well, I guess I'm going to put my entire life at risk. Those seem like pretty terrible choices. So we do want people to think this through. Again, it doesn't have to be some extended, super long conversation about it, but we don't want to just go giving false hope to people who maybe have never been a part of things before. People have legitimate concerns. This is new for the WTU under mayoral control to be this, confrontational, and it's important, but we also don't exactly know what's going to happen. We hope they'll just back down because we've never done it before. And if we're organized enough, we'll scare them, but we don't know. There are other thoughts on kind of this issue. Steve already shared some stuff about how he addresses some of the concerns and inoculates people and gets them to recommit. Have others had experiences with this that have either been successful or... It's fine, I know it's been long. Just got one more. All right, so then it is the follow-up plan. Oops, I guess when it's copied, it copied weird. I'll replace the image when I save the PowerPoint. Basically, you do want to make sure that this isn't the only time you ever interact with the person and you never interact with them again. We don't necessarily have to have this level of conversation unless, you both really liked it and want to just kind of start talking more often. There's other ways to follow up and just kind of keep in touch, and they can be short and just checking in and see how people are doing, maybe seeing, oh, did you actually go to that action? How'd it go? Do you think that's something, that we should do again? Like, how could we learn from it and do it even better? It's just a chance to build that camaraderie, that relationship, to bring them into and to bring ourselves together in that union culture we can hopefully develop in our buildings so that no matter what issue comes up in the future, big or small, we always know we have each other's backs and can work together to figure it out. So very important to try to follow up. So that is it. It was very long. Sorry about that. If you do like kind of the way they laid out these steps and stuff like that, this book really is great. It's $15. If you buy a bunch of copies, it's less. If you're like trying to spread the good word in your building, I don't know. But it's Secrets of a Successful Organizer. But even if you just go to the website, they have free worksheets. A lot of the stuff they really put up for free. So if you just want to look online, they just have so much stuff. They've got like a whole, looked like mini lessons, that you could sign up for a free online course where they go through most of the book. I've not done it, so I don't know, but everything I've done with labor notes has always been very enjoyable. And they're just a fountain of information and they believe in member-to-member organizing and grassroots organizing as a union culture, not kind of a top-down model of unionism. And that's, I think kind of what we're trying to do here a bit. So this was today. Tomorrow Steve's gonna be doing phone tree. Then we'll be talking, I think Chizda is gonna leave gathering signatures on a petition and having that also be a way to build on your list. Saturday, I will be doing a training on social media, probably mainly focused on Twitter, because that is kind of the public social media avenue, but also talking about Facebook and how we can use it for internal organizing, which has really kicked off for the WTU in the past 2 months. We've almost tripled now the size of our Facebook group. And it is active. Speaking as the person who approves most of the posts, it's a lot of posts. People are very active and interacting. And then probably Sunday I'll be doing one on just ally building. Just who are some of the community allies we already have? How can we be good allies to them and vice versa? That'll be the 26th. And I will stop the recording.